All right, guys. Well, welcome back to another episode of Stay the Braves. Man, it is we're getting close to the start of the regular season. The Braves, though a couple injury scares with Jurickson Profar and most recently Austin Riley, have stayed healthy to this point. Again, knock on wood about that. In this episode, as we are getting close to the season, guys, I'm going to go full on with my playoff predictions. I'm going to throw out some of the teams I think will be the best this season. A few of my win projections. I'll talk about a couple other projection systems and what they're saying about teams, their playoff odds, their World Series odds. And then I'm also going to give you my playoff bracket predictions and who's going to win the American League, National League, and World Series. So let's go ahead and get going. All right, guys. Well, here we are, another episode of Stay the Braves. I really appreciate you guys tuning in for another one of these. And every season, as we are getting close to the start of the regular season, I throw out my playoff predictions, how I think the Braves are going to do. Obviously, with this being a Braves podcast, I'll lean into that a little bit more. But this one does tend to be a little broader because I'm talking about the whole league. I'll give you my opinions on some other teams, why I think they're going to make the playoffs, why I think they might miss the playoffs, that sort of thing. But particularly, let's start with the Braves and what kind of year I think it will be for the Braves, or maybe at least what I hope it will be, because obviously these are predictions. I can't see into the future too much. If I had seen into the future for 2024, I would have, shouted from the rooftops to, I don't know, rest Acuna or whatever. So that being said, looking back, 2023, I won't look back too far, but 2023, a really fun season, one of the most enjoyable regular seasons I think I've ever had as a Braves fan. Tons of excitement, a lot of walk-off hits, walk-off homers, all that stuff. And it ended with playoff disappointment, right? And so many highs, but ending with a low, losing to the Phillies. And you'll recall, the players are just like super motivated after that loss. They come back 2024 spring training, and it's all about World Series or bust. And I think I don't know, it almost sets a mood of anxiety or just pressure, right? It's pressure that you're feeling from the get-go, and it just nothing worked in 2024. And I don't think it was necessarily the World Series or bust talk that threw off the Braves. It was injuries more than anything. But you did have some guys not have their best season. Certainly Matt Olson, and we can go down the list of that whole thing. But it was just a grinding season for the Braves. Kind of amazingly, they made the playoffs. Most teams, I think, would have cratered and not have made it. They did barely make it. They had a tiebreaker with the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks stayed home. The Braves went and played the Padres, and it ended after that, right? Getting quickly swept out of the playoffs from there. They did make the playoffs, and I think from a player standpoint, they have a lot to be proud of. From a fan standpoint, it was just not a fun season to watch, and you can appreciate those guys that were in there at the end. But the team that went to San Diego as a playoff team didn't have Austin Riley, didn't have Spencer Strider or Ronald Acuna, didn't have Chris Sale for that series, right? So it was not the same team that the Braves plan to field this season. So when we talk about 2025, look, spring so far, it's felt more measured. There's not a lot of World Series or bust talk. It's just like we got to do the things we need to do, and we know that we're good. And, it's a lot more of, I think, probably what they sounded like in 2023. Again, we've had a couple near misses in terms of injuries. Hopefully, a lot of that is luck and fortune and whatever you want to call it. But the Braves had none of that last year. Hopefully, these near misses are signs of some better fortune in 2025. So can the Braves reclaim their 2023 mojo and, get and stay healthy? And I think those are two big things. Will we see more of a 2023 version of the Braves with maybe a little more edge, or having learned a few more things and being a little more ready for the playoffs, hopefully, if they make the playoffs, and I think they will. So can they find their mojo? Can they be healthy? And then if they make the playoffs, can they turn this into playoff success? The Braves didn't make a lot of moves this offseason, and so I think it felt like a flat offseason, but it's easy for us to forget how good this team can be when it's healthy, because it hasn't been healthy and whole for a long time, and it still isn't quite there yet. We're still waiting for Strider and Acuna to come back, but I think it will be soon, and I'm excited about that. As you start getting close to the season, you start hearing all of these expert opinions out there, picking who they think the World Series teams will be, or who are the best 5 teams or whatever. And multiple experts, I will just say this, multiple quote unquote experts, from podcasters like Foul Territory to MLB Network. I've just heard a lot of these supposed experts putting the Braves third behind the Dodgers, who I think certainly should be 1, and then behind the Phillies. And look, I think on one level you can understand it. The Phillies have bettered the Braves basically the last 3 seasons, okay? Twice in the playoffs after the Braves won the division. And then last year, finally, the Phillies win the division. But don't do much after that either in the playoffs, by the way. So I think on a national level, if you're a little removed from it, I think it's easy to kind of put the Phillies second. So in one way, I think it's fair. But where are they missing it? Well, they're missing it in that I think so many people, and even Braves fans, I think, can be guilty of this, have short memories and short attention spans and don't fully appreciate how good this team can be when Ronald Acuna is firing on all cylinders, when Spencer Strider is back, and you add him to Chris Sale, and Schwellenbach has looked like one of the best players on the team this spring, and Ronaldo Lopez, right? The pitching on top of one of the most elite offensive teams in baseball and one of the deepest offensive teams in baseball. So I think the Phillies have some issues. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of the Phillies. I'm never going to root for them. I'm going to try to give you, from a Braves perspective, I'm going to try to give you as much of a non-biased opinion of them as I can. But first, I want to look at some projection systems. So this is helping me remove some of my bias, right? Because I'm going to look at these projection systems. What are they saying? Are they seeing what I see, or am I wrong? So let's start with Zips. I'm not going to go through every team. Obviously, that would take forever. But I'm going to take some of the top teams. We're going to talk about the Zips projections and the Pacoda projections, and these are probably the 2 of the most most widely used projection systems for projecting team records, and they'll use a lot of other things too. But yeah, I think these are 2 certainly worth looking at. So let's start with Zips. They have the Dodgers projected at 96.9 wins. I will say Zips tends to under project win totals. So I think most people would expect the Dodgers to be a 100-win team this year, okay? But Zips is projecting them to have the best record in baseball by a fairly wide margin at 96.9 wins. They give their their percentage to make the playoffs at 97.5%, and they give a percentage of winning the World Series win odds at 23%, which is crazy high, though the Braves had a pretty similar projection entering last season. So, you just recall how much projection systems like the Braves last year and how everything went wrong for the Braves. So projections, of course, are only that. We can only see, it's a snapshot of how good is the team right now. And, you put all this into a computer system and there you go. But I think we would all agree, especially based off of who the Dodgers were last year, win the World Series, kind of dominate the offseason, that yes, they should obviously be considered the best team in baseball. The Braves are number 2, and I will say solidly number 2 in the Zips projections, with a projected 93.6 wins, a percentage of making the playoffs at 93%, which is crazy high, and a 15% chance of winning the World Series, also very high. And it's going to be obvious as I'm stating these other, what I would say, top teams. The Braves and Dodgers are in a different league. Just in terms of, again, we're not talking about injuries or what might happen outside of that. We're talking about the rosters. The Dodgers are the obvious best. The Braves are the obvious second best team in baseball based off of Zips. Okay, so Phillies are number 3. The Phillies come in at 87.5 win projection total, 70% chance of making the playoffs, and a 5.5 chance of winning the World Series. Mets come in number 4, 86.1 wins, 62% chance of making the playoffs, and a 4% chance of winning the World Series. The Yankees and notice first AL team, and the AL is definitely down a lot this year. And the Yankees are down even with the Garrett Cole injury. But Yankees at 85.8 wins projection, 63% chance of making the playoffs, and a 6% chance of winning the World Series. Notice they're slightly under the Mets in a win projection total, but because the AL is worse than the NL, they have a better World Series percentage odds. And then the Diamondbacks would come in next, and they're the last ones I'll do for Zips. 85.6 wins, a 58.8% chance of making the playoffs, and a World Series odds chance to win the World Series 4%. Okay, so for Zips, I think these are the 6 best teams in baseball. Once you get to the D-backs or lower than that, it gets muddled, and a lot of teams are pretty much right in that. In fact, maybe the D-backs are even in that group. But I wanted to include them because I kind of like the D-backs, and I want to talk about them a little bit more in this episode. All right, the PECOTA projections. Again, the Dodgers. They love the Dodgers. 103.2 wins is their projection. And PECOTA has historically not liked the Braves as much. I'll get into that in a second. But, man, they really like the Dodgers. And I do think they're a little more aggressive with their projections for wins. And obviously you see that here. They're giving the Dodgers a 100% chance of making the playoffs. So in PECOTA's mind, there's no possible way, nothing can transpire that would take the Dodgers out of the playoffs. I don't know. To me, 99%. I mean, is there a chance? Could something happen? I feel like something could happen to cause them to miss it. But okay, we get it. They're a good team. And a 21% chance of winning the World Series. So actually that part is lower than what Zips is saying. The Braves, they are giving the Braves a 92.5 wins projection, an 87.4% chance of making the playoffs, which is a little lower than Zips, and a 7.8% chance of winning the World Series, which is actually significantly lower than Zips. So you see here where PECOTA is kind of bringing the Braves down a little bit. They also really like the Mets a lot more than the Phillies. They have the Mets at 91.5 wins, an 82.6% chance of making the playoffs, and a 7.9% chance of winning the World Series, barely higher than the Braves' chances, even though they like the Braves' win total a little more. I'm not sure about that one. The Cubs, PECOTA actually really likes the Cubs too, and Zips does not like the Cubs near as much. 90.7 wins, an 87.5% chance of making the playoffs, and a 9.3 percentage to win the World Series, which is the second highest according to PECOTA. The Cubs have the second highest chance to win the World Series. I'm not sure about that one either. I mean, I get why you might make an argument to like the Cubs, but I'm not sure about that. Rangers, 90.3 wins. I'm also wondering, the Rangers have had a couple injury issues, and I really wonder if PECOTA hasn't updated since that time. But anyways, Rangers, 90.3 wins, make the playoffs, 81.6% chance, win the World Series, 8.2% chance, which is also higher than the Braves, according to PECOTA. Okay, I'm going to mention the Phillies here in a second, but there are 6 more teams between the Rangers and Phillies that PECOTA likes better than the Phillies, at least in terms of percent chance to win the World Series. I think that's interesting. Okay, so they really don't like the Phillies. They are projecting 85.9 wins for the Phillies. They are saying a 53.1% chance to make the playoffs, and again, a World Series odds of 3.4%, so pretty low there. Okay, so I'm trying to paint a little bit of a landscape. Who are the best teams? Obviously, PECOTA and Zips disagree some. Not disagreeing too much, except the Phillies in terms of like the top 3 or 4 teams. They don't agree on that one. But the Dodgers, Braves, and Mets seem to be fair. They seem to be in fair agreement there between those teams. They also don't, by the way, PECOTA doesn't love the Yankees either. Notice I didn't even mention the Yankees, though they were in that group of between the Rangers and Phillies. Okay, so here are my projections for who I think will be the top teams in each division. I'm just going to rank each team within each division. So let's go ahead and start with the NL West, and I'll work back to the East with the Braves. So the NL West, I mean, again, no, I'm not getting crazy here. The Dodgers are going to be the best team. I'm going to say 102 wins. I think that is very legitimate, even if they undergo, a few injuries. The Dodgers should absolutely win 100 plus games. They built their team, and I'm going to talk more about some of the top teams here, but they really built their team to be injury proof, especially with their pitchers. I do like the D-backs. So I have the D-backs number 2 at 88 wins and getting into a wild card spot. Then the Padres maybe just missing the playoffs, the Giants and the Rockies. Of course, after that, the Rockies might have the worst record in baseball. The Padres, they are on the edge. I mean, I could see them. I do like the top of their pitching staff, but they have some depth issues. They've had some kind of money issues since their owner passed away. This is one reason why Jurickson Profar didn't come back to the Padres. And if they're slipping a little bit by the time you get to the trade deadline, I could see them trading away a Dylan Cease or Michael King as they're on the last year of their contracts. All right, the NL Central. Okay, I am saying the Cubs are at the very least going to rack up wins. 89 or 90 wins, I think somewhere in there. So maybe not an absolute elite team, but a pretty solid team. And I don't think anybody else from the NL Central makes it. The Brewers are probably going to be their closest competition. The Pirates, and I don't know, you get to the bottom of this division, it's a little muddled. Pirates, Reds, and then probably Cards 5th. The Reds have a young team with some talent. The Cards, nobody knows what's happening with the Cards, the Arenado issue and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm going to say the Cards are going to be at the basement of the NL Central. All right, then the NL East, of course, which you guys probably most care about. I'm saying the Braves win 95 games. Now, last year I got really aggressive with my win projection. I think I projected like 104 wins or something like that, which actually, based off of 2023, it made some sense, and based off of a fully healthy team, it made some sense. But I'm going to be a little more measured here. 95 wins. It's still the second best record in the National League, which I think, again, behind the Dodgers makes perfect sense. I have the Phillies behind the Braves, with being probably the best wild card team at 89 wins. And then I have the Mets actually just getting in. I don't like the Mets quite as much as the projection systems do. I have them getting into the playoffs, but as the third wild card team. And then the Nats and the Marlins being the worst team in the NL East. Marlins going to be pretty darn bad this year too. All right, well, let's look at the American League. I don't know how many of you guys out there are as interested, but I will go through that so that we can set up what I think will happen in the playoffs in 2025. All right, the AL West. The AL West, man, who is going to win it? The Astros aren't as good this year. The Rangers looked like they might bounce back. They had a down year last year after winning the World Series, though that was kind of a surprise. But they've had a lot of injuries to their pitching staff. I'm like, who is going to win the AL West? The Mariners have no offense, but great pitching. I'm just going to stick with the Astros, and I don't love it. I'm not emboldened by any of these teams. They don't give me great confidence. But the Astros, even though they've lost some players, okay, let's just stick with the Astros. The AL Central is kind of equally muddled. It always is. So I'm going to go with the Royals. I don't love that. I mean, the Tigers, actually, probably a lot of people like the Tigers more than the Royals, but I kind of like the top of the Royals pitching staff. They've got Bobby Witt. And I think the Tigers actually overplayed, or overperformed a good bit in the second half, and I'm just not sure they can do that again. I have the Guardians 3, Twins 4, and White Sox 5. And by the way, AL West, I'm not sure I said it all. So I have the Astros winning it, the Rangers, Mariners, Athletics, and Angels. But I only have the Astros getting into the playoffs, winning the division. Okay, finally, AL West. I've got the Orioles winning the AL West. This one's a tricky one too, man. All of the American League is really weird this year. There's no like really clearly dominant teams. The Orioles are really young and really talented, but their pitching staff isn't anything to write home about. The Yankees with Garrett Cole going down, I still like the Yankees, but I have them as the number 1 wild card team. Then I also have the Red Sox getting in as the number 2 wild card team. And then the Blue Jays missing out, and the Rays. A lot of people like the Blue Jays. They are talented, but Blue Jays just always underperform. So let me talk about a few of these teams. I kind of went through that like a whirlwind, but let me give you some more insight on some of the things I'm thinking about. Okay, so let's start with the Dodgers. The Dodgers were the story of the offseason, as they were outspending the world, and they recruited Roki Sasaki to join them, and this is all after winning the World Series. They're deep. They're incredibly talented, but they're especially deep at starting pitching, and I think this is all by design. They're trying to create a pitching staff that they know they're going to have injuries in their pitching staff, and so they're just throwing a bunch of different arms at the issue, and a lot of talented arms. Now, a lot of these guys do have injury issues or injury, problems kind of that crop up year to year. Ohtani's coming back to the rotation, but they're going to slow walk that. And what's he going to be like? So there's a lot of question marks, but there's also a lot of talent and a lot of arms that even if 2 or 3 of them don't work out, they should be okay. But all that being said, there is a world in which they aren't as dominant as they appear on paper. What if Ohtani gets injured or Betts? I mean, the Braves have been down this road last year. And so I think they're close to 100% to make the playoffs, but are they going to be as dominant, especially as they enter the playoffs? I think that's a bigger question. So even if they're not as dominant, they are likely, highly likely to win the West, and are still going to be one of the top teams in the majors going into the playoffs. Zip projects them with the best overall offense and the best overall pitching in baseball. All right, the Braves. I think, like I said, I kind of already mentioned this, but I think even Braves fans are guilty, and I'll include myself. It's easy to forget how good this team was when they were fully healthy. And I think most of baseball has forgotten some of that. So, they are not breaking camp with their whole team. We are waiting on Strider and Acuna to return. And so there's some question marks still until we see them and what are they like, and are they fully back, or are they kind of half back, or whatever. But all that being said, the Braves are clearly the second best team in baseball. I think every projection system says that. My eyes say that as well. They do have some pitching depth worries. A lot of people will bring that up. But, A.J. Smith-Shawver has looked really good this spring. Grant Holmes, I think, has proven that he can be, a back-end starter, if not, in the bullpen once Strider comes back. A.J. Smith-Shawver might not start in the rotation, but I would be, I would probably bet that he will finish the year in the rotation. Let's just put it that way. So if Strider does return to form and the Braves are able to avoid major injury to the rest of their pitching staff, they're going to have one of the best starting staffs in the big leagues. I think Profar is really sneaky, one of the best moves of the offseason, even though the Braves were not as active as we would have all liked them to be, and they have bullpen questions, and they're not a perfectly rounded team. But I think the Profar addition is really nice. I think that the Braves' inactivity overall in the offseason probably has clouded some experts' opinions about picking the Braves. They're just not as sexy of a pick. But the Braves still have a younger, more dynamic offense than most teams in baseball. And honestly, it's kind of right there. It could even be better than the Dodgers if they return to the potential. So Zips projects the Braves with the second best offense just behind the Dodgers and the third best pitching in baseball. By the way, 2 spots ahead of the Phillies. And a lot of people think the Phillies have the best rotation. So that's kind of surprising to me. So let's get to the Phillies. This could legitimately be the last run for at least this version of the Phillies. They are getting older. I don't know if their window is going to just slam shut, but they have a few guys that are on the last year of their contracts, like Schwarber. So, we'll see. They have been fortunate, and I've thought this just from afar. The Braves, especially last year, of course, struggled with health. The Phillies, to me, it's just felt like they've been very fortunate with health over the last 3 years. Harper's has dealt with some injuries, but other than that, they've kind of weathered it. And again, the Phillies need to stay healthy to be at the top of baseball. Again, their pitching is why they are ranked so highly. Adding Luzardo could bring a big time return. Andrew Painter, the young guy is there, could be another dominant arm of their rotation. So their starting pitching is going to be a bear to deal with for the Braves and for the rest of baseball. But unlike Atlanta and Los Angeles, I don't think the Phillies offense can carry the load. They have a good offense. It's a top 5 offense. Okay, so Zips projects the Phillies with the 5th best offense and the 5th best pitching in baseball. That screams very good team. But their offense has been susceptible to a lot of swing and miss, getting on base, and I don't think they've really solved those issues. And it's proved out to be one of their bigger weaknesses in the playoffs, and I still think it's there. All right, the Mets. Adding Juan Soto adds huge value offensively. This is very obvious. I shouldn't even have to say that. They're projected by Zips to have the 3rd best offense in baseball. Obviously, they brought back Pete Alonso. They've got Lindor. But with early injuries to Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas in the starting rotation, they are shaky in their rotation for sure. A lot of question marks. They're projected 12th in pitching by Zips, but I don't know if I really even buy that. A lot has to go right with the Mets because they don't have the depth. They have, I'd say their starting 9 and all that looks really good on paper. But if one of their main guys goes down, I just think they like, what the Braves had to endure. I don't think the Mets could endure that for very long at all. The Mets are also not especially inspiring to me on defense or on the base paths. They're kind of slow. They're not very athletic. They can hit home runs, right? And they plan to do that with Soto and Lindor and Alonso, but they don't have great balance in that lineup. So I buy the Mets to be good, right? I have picked them to make the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to be quite as good as the projections say they are. All right. There is a group of teams very closely stacked together in the ranking systems after the Mets. So let's go through some of these just really briefly and my feelings on them. The Rangers. Okay, so the Rangers had an odd and disappointing 2024, and their spring has been full of injuries for their starters. So that really makes me back off the Rangers. I kind of liked them entering spring. So I'm just not sure their pitching can hold up. They're going to have to lean on DeGrom a lot. Is he back? Okay, if he's back and stays healthy all year, then you like the Rangers a lot. But I just don't know if he is. The Yankees. Okay, the AL already didn't seem to have a dominant team. I mean, the Yankees were the best, probably, of the group, but now the Yankees have been weakened with the Garrett Cole injury. So I think, they might still be the best AL team, just barely. I don't know that they are. Giancarlo Stanton is also going to be out a long time. But look, them adding Max Fried looks like a brilliant move at this point after having lost Garrett Cole. They do have Jason Dominguez coming up. Maybe he just breathes new life into the team. So they're not a bad team. I expect them to make the playoffs. But are they the dominant team that I think they maybe could have been if Garrett Cole had been healthy and then maybe they add something midway through the season? Yeah, I don't think they're going to be quite there. I still think they'll be good, but maybe not dominant. The D-backs. I mentioned I do like the D-backs. I think they've always been a pesky team, a good team. They have really good starting pitching. They barely missed the playoffs last year. They lost the not coin toss, but the Braves barely got them and got to the playoffs last year. So I expect the D-backs to be good again. I expect Corbin Carroll to bounce back from a tough sophomore season. So I like the Diamondbacks a lot. I expect them to be in the playoff mix. The Cubs, I've mentioned them. The Cubs on paper, I think, should be good. But, they have underwhelmed over the last several seasons. Even last season, they kind of underwhelmed. So it'll be interesting to see how these parts fit together. They added Kyle Tucker. Will these new additions just kind of work or not? Pacoda, again, loves the Cubs. Zips doesn't. I think the NL Central is not very good. So that's going to benefit the Cubs a lot to at least make the playoffs. The Red Sox, okay, a big wild card for the Red Sox could be their young prospects that are all knocking on the door of the big leagues. This is really hard to project. They also added Garrett Crochet and Alex Bregman. I think those are obviously beneficial additions to the team. So I kind of like the Red Sox to bounce back a little bit. I do like them to barely squeak into the playoffs. All right, the Mariners. The Mariners are such a weird team. They have great pitching, second in ZiPS in pitching, but a very weak offense. I don't think you can succeed with no offensive punch, and there just isn't a good vibe in Seattle right now. There's been some reports, even from the players, that hey, we didn't add anything. There's been a lot of issues with the ownership just not willing to spend and just kind of standing pat. And I just don't see the Mariners doing it. They've kind of barely missed the playoffs the last couple of years. I think that continues. The Astros, they always seem to find their way into the postseason. And again, someone has to win the AL West. But they did lose Bregman and Kyle Tucker. I mean, can they withstand that and still make the playoffs? This is also Framber Valdez's last year at least in his arbitration year with the Astros. So it could be his final year there. Could be the Astros' final contending year. We'll see. I think it could go either way. I think they probably make the playoffs, but don't do much beyond that. The Orioles, I mentioned already that I like the Orioles to win the AL East. Similar to the Braves early on in their run, I think young teams are really very hard to predict because they just don't have years of success behind them to predict on. So I think the Orioles are very talented. I think they are, with Garrett Cole going down, probably the most overall talented team in the AL. The problem is it's almost all with their position players. They're going to lean on Charlie Morton a lot to be like their number 2 or number 3 starter. So, Braves fans, that tells you right there, that's tough. But I think they're still going to get it done with their very talented young stars. The Royals. Okay, the Royals, for all the projections, look very average on both sides of the ball. But I really like their starting pitching, especially at the top. And they have Bobby Witt Jr. And I don't know, there's something about the Royals that just seems to, even though probably on paper they're a 500 team, they just kind of do a little better than that, and that's all you have to do to win the AL Central. The Tigers, like I've already mentioned this, I'm not in love with the Tigers. I mean, they have some really good pitching at the top. Tarik Skubal, obviously number 1, but they really overperformed in the second half. I just don't buy that they'll do it again. Maybe they will, but we'll see. All right, finally, I wanted to mention the Blue Jays. So the Blue Jays always seem to underperform their projections. I think it just happens again. If they are struggling at the trade deadline, trading Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette could reshape several contenders out there. And I just think that happens. I don't think they have a lot of good vibes either going into this season without, they didn't get the Guerrero extension done. And so I just don't think that bodes well for them. All right, guys. So let's go into my 2025 playoff predictions, and at the end, I'll tell you who I think wins it all. Let's start with the American League wildcard rounds. So I have the Red Sox as the 3rd wildcard team playing the Royals, and I have actually the Red Sox winning that series. Again, Garrett Crochet in a short series is a nice thing for the Red Sox to have. I actually think they're probably a slightly better team than the Royals, even though the Royals win the AL Central. In the other wild card round, I have the Yankees beating the Tigers. I do think the Yankees will probably be a better team in the second half. I expect they're not going to just sit on their hands with, with Garrett Cole going down. I think they'll probably load up at the trade deadline and be pretty formidable in the second half of the year. The NL wild card, let's go over there. I have the Mets as the 3rd wild card team going against the Cubs. I have the Cubs winning that. I think the Cubs have a little bit more pitching, a little bit more well-rounded, though I think that could be a close series. And then I have the Phillies and Diamondbacks. I have the Diamondbacks winning that. And look, maybe this is where my Braves bias comes in. I don't want another Braves-Phillies matchup, okay, but, the strikeout problems have killed the Phillies, especially recently in the playoffs. That hasn't been solved. The Phillies are basically the exact same offense. Maybe they make a move at the trade deadline that changes them up a little bit, but I just, again, I like the Diamondbacks. I think they're up and coming, and I have a lot to play for. They have really good pitching. In that series, I like the Diamondbacks. All right, the ALDS. This would set up Orioles versus Red Sox. This was a tough one for me because, again, I think the Orioles pitching is so light. Maybe they do something at the trade deadline to bolster that, but I've got the Orioles beating the Red Sox in probably a close series. And then the Astros and Yankees are the other matchup. I'm going to say the Yankees, again, because I think they probably have gotten better throughout the second part of the season. The NLDS, I've got the Dodgers versus the Cubs. The Dodgers, obviously, the 1 seed. And I think they're just going to overwhelm the Cubs. And then I have the Braves versus Diamondbacks. I think I like I like the Braves a lot in that series. Maybe Braves in 4. Okay, let's go over to the ALCS. Would be Orioles Yankees, an AL East matchup of the two. And in this situation, even though the Orioles win the AL East in this series, I like the Yankees. The Orioles have struggled some in the playoffs. I'm going to say that kind of gets to them again. The Yankees, they made it to the World Series last year. Maybe Max Fried, stars in this ALCS. I don't know, but I like the Yankees maybe in 6 games in the ALCS. NLCS, all right, the epic matchup of the Titans, Braves, Dodgers. This is probably the true World Series if this were to happen. And I'm saying the Braves in 7. And let me say this, and this is where I'm going to get called a homer, but though maybe some of you guys out there are homers too. But I will say this. The Dodgers and the Braves are, to me, the clear top 2 teams. I think Philly is just behind them, though I don't think they're maybe quite as well built for the playoffs, and they're getting older, right? I've kind of said all that. But as always, injuries will play a huge part, especially with starting pitching staff. The Braves have entered the playoffs the last 3 years just not in a good situation health-wise, especially with their starting pitching. Which elite teams are the most prepared, are the healthiest? We can't know that. But I will say this, if the Braves staff is totally healthy, I know that's a huge if, but if they're healthy entering the playoffs, which would include a Spencer Strider and a Chris Sale and a Schwellenbach and a Ronaldo Lopez, I like the Braves in a 7-game series. Braves in 7 over the Dodgers. And I'll tell you this, it will be the most epic NLCS maybe of our lifetimes between these two teams. Okay, so that would set up a Braves-Yankees World Series, which would be interesting. The Braves don't have a great history, at least more recent history in my lifetime, of playing the Yankees in the World Series. But I'm saying they get this revenge. The Braves take it to the Yankees and win this World Series in 5 games. I think the Braves and Dodgers are both pretty significantly better than the Yankees. The Dodgers proved that last year, and they're even better. The Yankees aren't quite as good as they were last year. Okay, but again, the American League is weaker. And I would say for Braves fans, Dodgers fans, Phillies fans out there, if you make it to the World Series, you will be the favorite. And I would say that's certainly true here with a Braves-Yankees matchup for sure. All right, guys. Well, it's fun to talk about this stuff. We're just all going to hope that health is kind of the number one thing going forward. You get to this point of spring, everybody's kind of ready to go. And I certainly am too. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode of State of the Braves, and I'll talk to you soon.